also getting quite a bit of concern about the apartment complex going on at 4th Street where you go up to Summit Ridge. They seem to be blocking traffic, and their traffic control plan has been detouring people. And at one point they were detouring, they detoured me, and that was not consistent with their control plan. I think they've also done some work in the right of way that has made the patch kind of a difficult patch there. So that's another follow-up issue of concern to Ward 1 residents that we brought up. There was concern about Twin Lakes on 4th Street where there's another apartment complex going on, but I understand that road and access into the Twin Lakes neighborhood is going to be fixed pretty soon. It's about a year from the Pine Haven fire, and I am working on an event, me, myself, and I, and maybe our fire chief, to walk the path of the utility lines that come out of the top of Collin and go all the way across the flank of Matt Rose and serve an unincorporated residential neighborhood, because I haven't gotten a good answer of why we have utility lines running across the flank of the mountain, extreme territory, above ground, when serving an unincorporated subdivision that could also be served by lines off the Mount Rose Highway. So we'll be looking into that, and I want to let folks who are impacted by that and concerned about those utility lines that I haven't forgotten about those. It's been nice to see the old, I call it the Cushion shopping center that's been vacant for about 15 years get built, but unfortunately it's been built with a Starbucks that has a driveway right on to Keystone, just outside of the NDOT right of way, because NDOT never would have approved that. And I forecast a fair amount of conflict, as does everyone else. And I tried to get the manager to pull that back, but he didn't. And NDOT engineers are particularly concerned because they manage that interchange there, that not only are you going to have folks going eastbound on 80 coming out where people are trying to go, but you're going to have the westbound on 80 people. So I came out of the casino core, I got my coffee, I'm heading back over the hill, and I want to cross Keystone Avenue, and a disaster is in the coming. So unfortunately, someone permitted that. They probably should not have. And the only way to call it back maybe would be by a nuisance, but I've asked people to start measuring the crashes there because we'll see them. Sewer rates went up this last week. You can expect $5 to $6 a year increase on a single family residential, and they've gone up about 35% since I started in the council in 2012. And a fair amount of that is paying for the expansion up instead. And I was briefed today on some of the sewer utility plans that we have. Some are good. Standing up the stormwater is going to be a very equitable rate structure, so that those large utility distribution buildings will be paying their fair share. People with big parking lots will be paying their fair share. Us homeowners and residential people in multifamily will get a better deal. But there's a lot of inequities in the rate structure, and a lot of that's being carried by folks within Ward 1. So that's a concern for me, and why I always mention and note when our sewer rates are going up. I sit on Tumwa. October was the end of the water year, and it was a drought year. We're not in bad trouble yet, but if we have another bad winter, you'll start hearing, you know, I would not, there's no way we can go another drought year, I would think, without putting some calls for conservation in next year. So hopefully this is a good sign here. I think redistricting, you all talked about redistricting, and I sat down with staff today and looked at the preliminary maps, and not too exciting, which is good, but Ward 1 does need to grab some new neighborhoods. And that's great, because I love all the Ward 1 neighborhoods, and the remainder of my time as the Ward 1 council member will be exciting to get to know a new neighborhood and their constituents. So whatever Ward 1 gets, I'll be very excited to have them come in. The street program, we're going to have Humboldt Street area is getting redone in the 23 cycle. There's going to be a neighborhood meeting, postcards going out to those residents.
They're already out, and it happens on Thursday.
This Thursday at
Plymouth Jim.
Jim. And we had a cleanup this week at Oxbow for the Dickerson neighbors to come and bring whatever they want to kind of take off their property with waste management franchise agreement allotment. And we're going to have one for the Plymouth neighborhood in November. The Jacobs agreement that Mr. Rangel brought forward is inadequately drafted with inadequate information. To even explain what Mr. Jacobs has to do in return for the great benefits he's getting, which for people is, let's say, if you're a single family sewer ratepayer like me is going up about $5-6 this year in your charges, you're paying and he's getting privileges off this sewer fund, because when you demolish, you get 5 years to claim that sewer connection. But he's getting a privilege of the manager suggesting that he gets a longer time frame, which is a great incentive for someone to demolish and not build anything. And so I'm not looking forward. I don't see any agreement that is calling him to build anything meeting a public policy, and he's getting a break from the sewer fund while the rest of us are seeing our rates go up. Along the lines, the redevelopment agency was re-upped for another 40 years for a whole lot more mischief and saddling general fund obligations in deals to people like Mr. Jacobs, although Mr. Jacobs is not queued up for a redevelopment subsidy at this point in time. But I voted against the redevelopment agency life extension, and I have a newsletter on it, substack.com. Go to Jenny Breckis. It's about the vampire redevelopment agency and how we should have put that thing to bed, but the council is going to let it live again. And it'll just hurt the general fund if it doesn't just go out the window to people who can get subsidy deals through the council. The RTC Transit Strike is not just a labor issue. It's a reflection of how bad poorly we're doing transportation in this region, what our priorities are. And it's sad because we had a nice little bus system and it's going to take years to get it back. And there's some lifts that need to occur. I'll be part of an event this Saturday down at Civic Plaza, talking about the path forward to do transit better in our region, because it's a sad thing. It's really hurting the people who need the most. Those who need that transit system to get to jobs and other places. And marijuana is probably coming on the agenda. The legislature decided wanted to give cities the ability to do marijuana differently. Pickup, drive-through, lounges. It's a zoning ordinance rewrite, and I'm not going to stand for any new zoning ordinance work unless we get short-term rentals regulated, because that's what I hear from Ward 1 that they want to do, and the same people would do the same thing. So that's going on, and that's about all I have for everyone. It's been busy at the council, and I wouldn't expect that to slow down between now and the end of the year. But we got some big ticket items because the manager's only been on a year. He's kind of at this point formed things to kind of say how he wants to move forward. Does anyone have any questions for me? Okay, great.
Thank you.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Here at Board, and I represent Jason. It's a little unusual for a council member to take a position on an item before she's heard the item on Wednesday. So I'm curious, this is recorded, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
If there's a conflict now to vote, did you already just took a position on being against the item on Wednesday?
No, and you know what? I can do my report in any way I want. It's not a discretionary entitlement, it's a development agreement. And you can take that up through our attorneys or at the floor, but you're in no way going to disqualify me on this item. And I will say what I want about it, how I want. But of course, as people know, my mind is never made up on anything until I get to the table. But my primary comment was the table of the appendices on the Jacobs agreement is missing. It has, I think, A through F appendices, and only 2 of those are shown up. So it's inadequate in terms of
No, it's on the website.
information.
It's cityofreno.com. It's on the website right now.
I'll let you say that, but when I sat with the city manager 2 hours ago, it wasn't. We both agreed that it wasn't. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here.
Move on to item A5, staff liaison report. Hey, well, Jenny kind of touched on what I was gonna talk about, so I'll just add to it. We had a cleanup in Oxbow nature study area this last weekend. Right before this meeting, I had a conversation with one of the residents of the area, and she was very grateful that we were able to put those dumpsters there and get the river cleaned up a little bit. As she said, we're having another one at Plymouth Park. That's gonna be the first weekend of November. We're planning for 3 dumpsters. This is all tentative, not 100% sure, but that is what we're aiming for before it gets too cold. And again, as Jenny and I mentioned, we have the Humboldt sidewalk meeting happening on Thursday at 6:30.
Hey, Nick,
Yes.
maybe let everyone know that once a month you and I go out on a field trip of Ward 1 and sometimes outlying areas. And then if anyone wants us to come look at anything that they think our eyes need to be on.
Yeah, those trips are very insightful. We get a lot of different constituents that are concerned about different areas. And Jenny and I are always good about getting out within the next couple of weeks of setting the request and checking out the area.
And sometimes we can arrange to meet folks there too. Yep.
Thank you. Move on to business items. We'll move on to item B1, presentation and discussion regarding utilization of fiscal recovery funds from the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 and ways to provide input. This is a discussion item only.
Good evening, I'm David Hodge, the Director of Policy and Strategy for the City of Reno. With me is Jordan.
Policy and with the governor's this up.
So as many of you know, the state received a couple $2 billion in fiscal relief funds. Some of those are allocated to each of the cities and entitlement areas. The city of Reno received $52 million. And the goal of that is to find ways to spend that money in which helps the city recover from the pandemic and to continue to prevent efforts from the pandemic continuing to spread. There are 5 critical buckets where those dollars fit into. We have to find ways to spend them. So the council approved us building an allocation plan back in August. Since that point, we've embarked on an effort to get public feedback, community feedback, council feedback, and staff feedback on the best ways to spend the dollars that are associated with the ARPA funds. We've partnered with the state. Jordan will tell you a little bit about the opportunities we have that the state's been going around gathering on their 75-day tour of gathering feedback. And then part of our communication plan is to meet with each of the NABs, encourage staff for participants from the NAB to fill out the surveys to give us their feedback so that we can also incorporate that into how we can spend the $52 million that the city has been allocated. It sounds like a large number, but as Councilwoman Breckes and I were sitting in a meeting earlier, one sewer project can cost $81 million. So $52 million to a city is a significant dollar amount that can be spent very, very quickly. So that's why your feedback is incredibly important. So I'll let Jordan talk about the feedback process and why we partnered with the state.
So broadly, the reason why we're doing it this way is that of the $6 billion that we get, it's tranched into these different buckets that go to different locations and go to different services. And so the goal of combining the data collection between both the state and the city is to make sure that those projects go to kind of the most narrowly tailored bucket of funds that they're available to be spent out of. We don't want the state spending money on, for instance, home healthcare aids or transport for them in Reno, if that is something that already has a distinct bucket specified for. And so we're trying to give all of these points. And so on the website, NABRecovers.com, you can submit your individual request. And one thing we want to encourage everyone to know is to make sure when you're submitting requests, do them individually so that when they go to the spreadsheet, it's each individual idea forms a new row. It's not that we have to figure out that you didn't actually need, there should be a dog park ice skating rink. Sounds like a great idea, but maybe keep those separate. Dogs can't skate very well. So we're collecting this information. It is primarily to be focused back on things that were impacted by the pandemic or things that would prevent a future pandemic. The other thing that it's important to remember is that this is a one-shot investment of funds. So this is not, it would be great to hire more staff for certain projects, but this money is going to go away. And so we want to make sure that that investment has an impact after that one-shot use. And so it is important to kind of think more of infrastructure or larger systemic issues that are going to help fix something as opposed to an individual, like, well, let's get more seasonal staff or something like that. So that pretty much covers it. Happy to answer any questions about the process or the funds.
I think one good example, Jordan, why we partner with the state, we each got our own funds, but the state got a lot of money as well. Our goal is that we're not going to do the same project that Sparks is going to do and that Washoe County is going to do, so we're each spending our money the same way 3 different times. So our goal is through partnerships and collaboration, understanding a really good one is the state brings up a lot is broadband. And I know that's something that's important to a lot of residents. And working with the state, we've identified they already have a person that's building a plan to improve broadband across the state. And it would make no sense for Reno, Sparks, Washoe County, and all the jurisdictions to come up with their own individual broadband plan, when really broadband is something that can be impacted statewide. So we're going to work very closely with the state. We're going to encourage these guys to spend their money on broadband to help our citizens so that we can spend our $52 million on other projects as well. So that's just one example of the operation and how we're putting the collaboration together to make sure we're not spending money over and over again on the same project just because we all got our own buckets of funds. So I think the thing I'll close with is if you didn't get a survey from Zoe walking in, we'll get you one. Please fill it out, leave it with Nick, or go on the website, fill out the survey on the website. A couple of different options. You can fill out a survey if you just have a general thought of how money should be spent, or if you have a specific project that you say, I need $8 million to ice skating for dogs, you can go on and fill out an actual project proposal with all the details and then submit that to the state. Same at the city of Reno, reno.gov/recovery. There's information on that site on how to get to these locations, but there's also, I think, if you have a city of Reno specific proposal you would like to submit, we will gather those as well.
Any questions from the board? Any questions from the audience? All right, thank you for your
Thank you guys
time.
for your time.
Thank you.
Move on to item B2, presentation and discussion by Parks and Recreation regarding the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Service Plan for discussion only.
For the record, Jamie Troy, Director of Parks and Recreation, and with me, I also have Dan Massey, Recreation Manager. Tonight, we wanted to give a quick overview. The Parks and Recreation Department is working on a master plan, and it's called the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Service Plan. So we abbreviate it PROS because that's a lot easier to say. And are you giving me a view? I apologize, there was a mix-up in my schedule, so I have Fozzie Bear, our therapy dog, with us tonight. He's got a long day today, but hopefully he behaves and doesn't get too distracting. All right.
Here, Jamie.
All right, I'm gonna sit so that I can actually, there we go, thank you. Okay, so the city of Reno worked on the master plan a couple of years ago, and it was called Reimagine Reno. And through that process, the residents, we had an amazing turnout with the public and giving us the input on this Reimagine Reno plan. And what they said, 3 things, and we're just gonna focus on the first one, but they wanted Reno to become a base for outdoor activities.
Just click.
Thank you.
Just click.
And so for that, in order to make Reno a base for outdoor activities, we do need to make sure that we ensure that our parks and rec facilities are well maintained, that they're accessible, interconnected, and that they meet the demands and needs of our residences. And then last but not least, we want to make sure that we try to conserve and protect Reno's natural resources. All right, so I think all of us realized how important Parks and Recreation was when the pandemic hit, and a lot of the indoor activities needed to stop. And the things that you could do were safest outside. We saw a tremendous increase in the use of our outdoor parks and our trails. And I think it really just highlighted how important Parks and Recreation are to communities' quality of life. When you live near a park, your economic value goes up, that you also experience a healthier lifestyle, preservation of open space and trees also contributes to the environment. And then all of that added together is an increase to your quality of life. Okay, so challenges. The biggest thing that we have in Parks and Rec that we face challenge-wise is we've seen incredible growth in our community. And then with that growth comes a demand for more facilities and amenities. And then of course, with the usage of your facilities and amenities, there is increased need for maintenance. And here's the growth. So Reno's population has grown by 97%. With that, our parks have really kind of kept up with the growth. However, our rec facilities have not. And then what we have seen is our staffing levels definitely have not been able to keep up with the increased growth. So the little box on the left talks about the things that we have seen grow since 1991. It's kind of crazy to think that that's 30 years ago. But our staffing levels really on the right, you'll see that we really haven't changed much. A lot of that is due to the fact that when we had the Great Recession, we did have to lay off quite a bit of our staff, and we just haven't been able to recover as quickly as we would like. So our current operations, this is a summary of the parks side. I like to talk about the Parks and Recreation Department with the park side and then the recreation side. Then you can see that Reno has an amazing list of amenities as far as parks goes. We have 88 parks, over 700 acres, and then 37 miles of trail, 2,100 acres of open space, and then 24,000 trees. Those are public trees. And all of that is maintained by roughly 40 full-time staff. On the recreation side, the recreation team does an amazing job programming these facilities that you see up here. And we have 17 full-time staff that program these facilities, and then they're supplemented by the 21 30-hour-a-week part-time staff. Most of those 21 staff are at our before and after school sites, the Sierra Kids program. All right, so our biggest thing really is the parks and park maintenance challenges. So fiscal year 2021, we had 1,000 requests that were called into Reno Direct for parks related services. And those types of requests were about to address either weeds or trash, something's wrong with the tree, the broken sprinkler that we always get, lots of those, graffiti, lights, homeless encampments and parks. Those service requests also include along the Truckee River. The Truckee River is not exactly one linear park, but there are parks along the way. And so it's interesting to see that, we should have double the amount of park staff that we currently have. And so I've never strived to be average, but I'm incredibly proud of our parks team, given that they are pretty much overwhelmed by the amount of parks that they need to take care of, that their inspection grade is a C+. I think that, as we're able to add back staff, we were very fortunate in the last budget cycle to get 2 park maintenance workers and 2 park rangers. The park ranger program went away in the recession, and we're pretty excited to bring that program back this year. So we also need to talk about what it looks like for the next 20 years and our capital needs. Our parks team does a really good job working with Public Works in planning out improvements that we need to do. And it's either an improvement or it can be a new building. And so we have a list of CIP projects, and there's 255 of those projects on that list, with an estimated today dollar cost of almost $250 million, but we only get 1.5 million for the entire city. So the parks needs are 250, but the entire city, which includes what police needs, what fire needs, sidewalks, what works needs, is 1.5. So that's a very big challenge. But just because we don't have the funding doesn't mean that we don't plan, and then we try to work together with all the departments citywide to figure out which is the most pressing project and can we get it done with. So we participate in a survey that the Trust for Public Lands does each year. And what that does is we go in and we have to put in a bunch of data about parks and the parks and rec facilities that we have, square footage, acreage. And basically when we compare to like areas, pretty much we know that we're under what averages are. So that's that bottom table. And then what we know based on feedback from the community is that there's not enough pools, not enough flat fields, not enough dog parks, and not enough rec centers. And so what we're here tonight to do, we have been working on this plan for almost a year now, and we've done an electronic survey. And then because of the shutdown last year, we tried to do everything as virtual as possible. We've done some virtual town halls, but now that the NABs are back, we want to offer one in-person public input opportunity. So Dan will cover that in a second. But this PROS plan that we're working on really is just going to take a look at the next 20 to 30 years. We did a plan back in 2008, and not much was able to be implemented from that plan because of the recession. And so that plan was a really good starting point for us to then build on for this new plan going forward. And so far, what this plan does is it looks at our current and planned parks facilities, and then it looks at the additional facilities that we need. Like prime examples, we know that we should have a rec center in the North Valley. We don't, and so that is in that plan. Take a look at the actual services that we do in our service levels. And how are we doing? Are we meeting community expectations? And if we're not, what do we need to do in order to meet those community expectations? And then last, but certainly not least, the financial information. How much is it going to be? The list that I showed you, we know is a minimum $250,000 or $250 million to do those CIP projects. And so we're going to take a look at those updated numbers, what that looks like for the next 20 to 30 years. Thanks, Jesser. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Dan, and he is going to explain this process that we would like for everyone to fill out if you'd like to participate.
How's everybody doing this evening? Dan Massey, Recreation Manager. So we're going to run, I think Jamie's going to hand out a little exercise. So what you're going to get are 5 individual maps with the different 5 RTC districts on them. The legend is a little bit tiny. Well, I'll get that in just a second. So each one of these maps you're going to have for one of the 5 main assets that Parks and Rec Division operates. So that's going to be park space, community buildings, aquatic facilities, athletic fields, and courts. So there's going to be a brief description as far as what we define that asset to be, as well as how much we currently have. And really all we're asking, tell us what you would like to see for each one of those assets. You can mark it with a star, a smiley face, a dot, anything you want. Be creative. I like creativity. If you want to take these home and talk to your family about them, think about them some more, you can return them to, there's a email address up to the top, or you can take them to City Hall, the 11th floor, and drop them off with Karina. Or if you want to finish them today, I'll be here for a while to pick them up. And I'll be happy to take any questions anybody may have. Oh, and online attendance, please give me your email address and I'll send this both presentation as well as the maps to you guys as well. Valerie.
On a personal note,
Yes,
is
ma'am.
there any inkling of a future indoor tennis court anywhere? Or is it strictly outdoor?
How do you want to answer that?
On that fourth page, go ahead and you can put, you would like to see an indoor center. We're taking that into consideration, and there's been lots of ideas kicked around of where could we do an indoor one.
Right.
But yes, please, if you're interested in one, mark that down.
I also volunteer with the Sierra Junior Tennis.
Oh, nice.
Association. So, I mean, part of that, and then I also play, so I was just curious if that had been thrown out at any point.
In the 2008 plan, we talked to UNR about could we partner up and do something like that. And so it may or may not be getting carried forward, but if you put it on there, then we know that there's still some interest.
I would say put it on both the courts because it is a tennis court as well as the rec centers because it's an enclosed
Okay,
I would classify that more of a rec center, just start, say you want tennis facilities.
okay.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you, Kevin.
I just have a comment. The building the facility is one thing. Maintenance and operation is in my opinion, the bigger thing. Is the public made more aware of that issue? Because it's easy to say, hey, I want this, I want that. You know, in the long term, you have to be able to maintain this forever.
Correct.
So that's obviously where your funding issues come in. So
Yes,
just a
yeah.
comment, that's all.
So there is going to be a section in the pro service plan that talks about the cost of maintenance for annual operating costs. So like the prime example is Moana Pool. So if you aren't aware, the Pennington Foundation gave us a generous pledge to be able to rebuild Moana Pool. And we also in that the proposal to the Pennington Foundation and in the pledge agreement, it talks about making sure that the city has dedicated funding to operate that building for a minimum of 25 years. So you're right, it is always a critical component to, you get to build it, but you also need to maintain it.
Any other questions? Anybody else?
I'll just say, you know, I came on the ran in 2011 to rebuild the Moana Pool. It's not rebuilt. We're going to issue a contract tomorrow or Wednesday is proposed for $19 million to remodel the RGJ building. That'll get us half of a police station after we bought it. So that's where the council priorities that has been my priority has been. It's been secondary to that and other things. And so when this process started, I was concerned about building up expectations that we can't fulfill. And I was more focused on Mr. Rangel's comment, and I'll mention back to Jacobs. The city gets like $1,000 for every residential unit that's built. They have to give that to the city, and the Jacobs agreement pretty much gives that to Mr. Jacobs to decide how he's going to build the parks or where he's going to build the parks. And when you get to policies, that's a policy I'll be looking forward to, in addition to the funding mechanism, because we failed at legislative efforts to get funding dedicated for parks. We failed this last session. We didn't have help from our people we vote and send down to Carson, but the other issues and, you know, how we make these deals with people about who gets to decide what our park needs are rather than a planning process like this. So I'll be looking for the policy piece because I think that's where we have more latitude.
Well, Jenny, didn't in the 90s, they used to make the developers build parks in the city?
Yeah, they usually do that, and Jamie can speak to that. In the outlying areas, they will be central to a neighborhood. Jacobs is different because it's integrated into an existing community. And so, you know, you can make the nuance there. And then some of the HOAs do maintain, and that's the model that Jamie has been able to, that has really kept our head above water on maintenance. But I would think that we need to, from a policy perspective, think about that a little bit more. Frankly, I think it's very ad hoc and case by case, and it probably needs to be one that, you know, should be examined from a policy perspective.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
We'll move on to item B3, discussion of climate resiliency and infrastructure priorities. Discussion.
Yeah, so we have had this on a lot from before, and I just want to kind of cue it up since we're new NAB. And I'll tell you, it came up today. You know, this snowfall that was kind of unexpected. You guys remember there was a snowfall, I think it was like November 29th, about 4 or 5 years ago, and the leaves were still on the trees, and then a bunch of trees broke down, and then the lines went down and people were without power. So at the time, the ward that I was, you know, this ward with our geographic boundary have really tried to think about where we have resiliency issues. And out where she lives, that neighborhood out by Patagonia pretty much just has one way in, for example. But if you go through near her gate, you can go through Belli Ranch and get out. You know, the fire department guarantees they'll get them out. So, you know, evacuation routes, which we've talked about quite a bit here. I think is a Ward 1 resilience issue, and I read the last 6 months about a community that did a fire evacuation drill. Remember, we had that discussion the first time we had our meeting? So I don't want to get away from thinking about our neighborhood's vulnerabilities. We're the leafy neighborhood, so, you know, if we had that event like we had, I mean, I don't think any trees really lost their leaves. So we could have a lot of down and then the power lines. We have neighborhoods that need probably fire drills. We know we have some flooding, flashy situations. So I don't want to leave that, but I'm more and more starting to want to talk to you guys about, you know, the big issue that I'm seeing is really what we do with smoke season, which is not just Ward 1. And when the county every 5 years has to review their emergency plan, and each time, twice, I said, let's do clean air centers, and let's call heat a risk. And I do think that heat is a risk for these neighborhoods, because my family is a 1950 house, and we just put air conditioning in this year. So a lot of our housing stock does not have air conditioning, or is getting it, or, you know, people aren't able to get it in, not mention the air purifiers. So I think we do have ward specific issues still. We've got these over resiliency issues, and this was all about, you know, trying to make us, you know, harden for risks to come our way. So I wanted to, you know, maybe just have this a progression of discussion of what you guys think, is this a value, or maybe we pivot completely to a different issue. You know, maybe the issue in Ward 1, like the first time we talked about, is, you know, we've got all these approvals on housing, but we're not getting stuff built. We're getting, you know, stuff torn down, or, you know, maybe we just want to be the ward for the next 3 years or whatever. Let's just focus on where we're getting housing units, what we're getting. Are we, you know, how we're growing, because we're the one to infill and get the new development mostly. Somerset's all built out. So I just wanted to open that up for a little conversation. And then also, I forgot to mention my comments. Have any of you seen or heard about a lot of rats? Like you have?
Well, I live on Brett Hart, and my neighbor across the street said that his neighbor behind him on Mark Twain said they were getting some big rats. And that was surprising. I never seen a rat in our neighborhood.
Yeah, Nick and I got that today too. And I mean, I've seen more squirrels in our neighborhood than I did before. And, you know, who knows why rats are doing what they are, and vermin, you know, vermin could be a sign of something, but just anyway, we're trying to follow up. So I appreciate you've heard in the Southwest about the rats. I'll keep my eyes open. But anyway, do you guys have any thoughts on this whole resiliency infrastructure issue? You've been on for a while, Rhonda, or do we, you know, just focus on things like Thousand Riverside and, you know, getting the Keystone Avenue Bridge queued up?
That's a tough one, Jenny. You know, our ward, I think, is very different from other wards because it is infill. And I think we have to protect our assets, including the Truckee as it goes through. And then look at those blights. I think that Keystone property is a blight.
Okay.
I think Zero Riverside is a blight because it just attracts homeless. Let's worry about getting those pieces of property with things built on them that add to the neighborhood and to the city.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I really don't believe that, you know, it's my role or the city manager's role to try and insert ourselves into someone's market decisions. You know, that's not, you know, there's actually laws, you know, kind of guideline that if we use redevelopment. But there are a number of properties I would like to see get developed very soon so they don't keep having projects, keep having drama, you know, be done with it. 1000 Riverside's easy because it's our own property, but if it was easy, it would have happened by now. So, you know, we could maybe frame our discussion on focus of, you know, some very isolated things like get zero, you know, every time talk about Zero Riverside and get it done, or, you know, where's the Keystone Avenue Bridge project going?
And I just will remind you on Zero Riverside, the council actually voted a year ago, or is it 2 years ago, in December, to request proposals for developing that. And that was supposed to go out within 30 days.
Yeah,
It never went
it
out.
hasn't. Yeah, I think it got tied up in COVID, but also tied up in redevelopment powers, economic
It
development
got
powers.
tied up with the city manager
Yeah.
vacancies and
Yeah,
all
yeah.
kinds of stuff, but, when the council votes to do something, it actually should follow through on what it has decided to do.
Yeah, okay, and I know that's a concern, and I don't know if you guys can bring Zero Riverside up for everyone, but yeah, it's just there, everyone knows where it is, right? Okay. Any other thoughts, you guys? I mean, maybe, do you have any thoughts?
Would focus on, like she was saying, the problems.
Yeah,
Not so much the.
okay. I mean, I really don't want to lose sight of the neighborhood's, vulnerabilities, which are still flooding.
Well, if you sit,
And
in-
deteriorating bridges.
you can sit in your neighborhood, right? I mean, you have your neighbors and you have your area that you're used to, but the second you drive out of your neighborhood, you drive down 4th Street, you see blight, you see homeless, you see all the other reasons I don't want to leave my neighborhood, right? So find a way for me to leave my neighborhood, right?
Yeah,
That's what everybody should focus on.
yeah. And now it's easier and easier for a lot of people to be able to just stay in the neighborhood all the time. Yeah, Zero Riverside, everyone knows it. Yeah,
It's at Riverside and Booth Street.
It's the old house by Reno, down the street.
yeah. I have talked about that with the historic preservation people, and they really do see value in the house of historic significance.
What are they gonna do with it?
Yeah.
Well, it's the cities to deal with it. But I don't mind if the focus of our board is on one property, for the next 3 years. Let's do that. Let's focus on it. Let's get it done.
My understanding of Zero Riverside is there's a deed restriction on it, like the county put on it before it came to Reno. It said it has to be used for a public use.
Yeah, when it was given, it was foreclosed on, taken over by the state. State gave it to the city of Reno under a provision that it be used for an open space public use purpose. But nobody's ever figured that out. And so the only thing it's being used for is nothing.
Yeah,
So I
well,
think the county city staff might be taking it to the Washoe County Commission to have them remove that.
yeah,
And then make it a viable piece of property for something cool that you guys would want.
Well, they were gonna do that 2 years ago. There are a lot of issues there, including the easement that runs the full breadth of it, that belongs to the neighboring condominiums that I'm part of, so that's why I know so much about it.
I mean, the problem is, if we can relieve the burden on it, it's, and I think it's just paying the back taxes, then you can put it to private use. It's great to have property go to private use, it comes on the tax rolls. But the way things are done is, if it goes to economic development purpose, it can go to anyone for any reason. And the last one we sold was there at, or one of the last ones we sold was there on Keystone at the trail rail tracks, and the guy immediately has a for sale sign up for it, And so how do you cement it into a purpose? I mean, I'd almost love to see it go as an adjoiner to your condominium association.
Yeah, if we had the money.
Yeah.
But one of the problems with it is it's a nice little thing, but it's tucked out of public view. And so it's a perfect place for homeless encampments and
Yeah.
all kinds of stuff goes on there.
Yeah, I mean, one vision has been to take this and put this with a historic designation. It's gonna cost to redo that more money than the building's worth, obviously, so it's a labor. And then you could have multifamily here, and the housing authority reached out to me and said, we wanna do some projects. And I said, well, take a look at Zero Riverside and that's what your association.
Yeah, because I don't think you're ever gonna solve the problem of homeless encampments until that parcel is developed in a way that's consistent with the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Problem is, before they wanted to put in a 17-story high-rise, which
Not many of those
Good
get
thing.
built, yeah. Well, let's keep let's kind of move off, Nick, we'll work on the agenda next time and just keep on Zero Riverside. Okay,
Any other questions or comments on this agenda item?
but we'll keep on infrastructure also, because, you know, Arlington Avenue is moving forward, or Arlington Bridge, and, you know, we should really be doing a bridge a decade in this area.
Yeah.
And they take a decade to get done.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, we're going to move on to item B4, development projects, for discussion only. So that's B 4.1, West 2nd Street and Church Lane right-of-way abandonment.
Appreciate it. For the record here, Gordon, and I always like coming to this NAB because I'm a Ward 1 resident, so it's nice to hear what's going on and like things like comment on some of the things that are happening on the agenda. Before I jump into this, let me just, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't say this. On the development agreement, that what a comment about the residential construction tax is not true. Jacobs would like to add more green space to downtown, like to have more urban gardens downtown. How you do that is with residential construction tax to invest it where it's being built. We're going to build between 2,000 and 3,000 units downtown. Should be a good pile of money to get a lot more really cool green space in downtown and Ward 1 that all of you can enjoy. So that's the reason for one of our proposals on Wednesday. That said, tonight before you is an abandonment. Again, on behalf of Jacobs Entertainment, we can continue to move forward Reno's online district. With me for that is Chris Mazanick, who's Vice President of Jacobs Real Estate Division. Good to be here. I get the next.
Yeah, that's right.
They got the mouse on it.
Oh, just click. Hold on. All right, what do you click now? Other one.
Just get click.
There we go. So I'm sure you saw in the paper this weekend, Reno's online district continues to move forward. Jacobs has finished up for the most part his acquisitions, now moving forward with the development phase. Tonight before you is the block of Arlington, 2nd, Ralston, and the tracks. So the Sands Casino is up here to the north. You have the railroad tracks. You have Ralston, 2nd Street, Arlington. This was formerly the UNR building, and there's a proposal, as you may have seen in the paper, that move forward with a 130 unit condominium project. In order to do so, we need to have a contiguous parcel on this block to build the development along 2nd Street. So now that Jacobs owns all 9 of 10 properties that abut Church Street and this little segment of Stevenson, we need to abandon this area here in order to create a development path and move forward with the condominium project. Here's another good vantage point of the zoning map. So orange, of course, is the entertainment district. We have pink, which is the northwest quadrant, kind of a holding designation until that's rezoned or a text amendment to update the standards. Counting district in green, Riverside district in blue. We are, again, this block entertainment district. And the proposal is to abandon this area in gray in order to make a contiguous block. We don't believe there's any, there's one finding for abandonments. Is there a material injury to the public? We believe that answer is clearly no, given 2nd Street remains as access, Ralston Street remains as access. Now that this is owned by Jacobs Entertainment, the public will not be using, this Church Street and Stevenson. So by abandoning it, it will not only not cause any issues for circulation and traffic or pedestrian movements, but it will allow us to have a contiguous block to build our condominium project in order to move forward Reno's the online district, add property taxes, construction jobs, and really kick off an area that has been blighted for a long time. I was born and raised here in Reno, went to Reno High School. We would never go down 4th Street. I'd never bring my kids down 4th Street or 2nd Street. And these projects that are moving forward, again, should bring all of us as Ward 1 members, City of Reno residents, and also hopefully a lot of tourists to come down and spend some money in the district. So here's kind of a technical map of what's proposed to be abandoned. So you can see Stevenson Church and then the little alleyway. As I mentioned, the reason for this is to construct a residential project. So the block is critical to create a contiguous property. There are some existing sewer and public utilities that are in this area. So when this is abandoned, there'll be easements back to the city for those utilities. When the development moves forward, it's Jacob's cost to relocate those in order to accommodate the developments. And the city does not come out of pocket for any sewer or stormwater relocations. There is one finding, no material injury. So you can see typically with abandonments, if all the property owners around the alleyway, agree that it's deemed no material injury to the public. 9 out of the 10 properties are owned by Jacobs who consent to abandoning it. There's one property here on Ralston, the property is not owned by Jacobs, so to make sure that property, was not harmed in this, the area in yellow will be granted an easement to this property owner. So this property owner, you'll see on my next slide, accesses the property off Ralston right now, but there's also 4 parking spaces here on Church. So they will have an easement to come in and out, to access both their property off of Ralston and also off of Church. And here's a picture of, so it's really some storage units. So the units can clearly be accessed with the curb cuts off of Ralston. You can see there's 3 or 4 parking spaces that are accessed off Church to get in there, and that will be maintained. This property owner will continue to have their access and their parking there to come in and out of Church Street. So they're not harmed. And again, the rest of the property is owned by Jacobs, and they're consenting to abandon this area. And again, what will be put there is brand new 130 unit condominium project. The plan is, I know Chris has been working very hard with architects, design team, construction contracts to move forward with phase 1, 63 units. We'll break ground next spring. There'll be plenty of parking, so there should be no parking concerns for Ward 1 residents or downtown businesses. As I mentioned, it's very important that Jacobs can continue to have urban gardens, green space. So this project will have an urban garden. You'll see plans moving forward with some additional green spaces downtown. A number of common areas, kind of all enclosed in glass, so to really have that transparency between Arlington looking through the glass to Second. I think a really classy and nice addition to downtown. I think it was mentioned earlier, what's going to drive you from leaving your homes and coming to this area? Nothing has in the past. This is phase 1. Phase 2 will be the additional units down here, and as the coming months ahead, we'll be announcing more plans, but a great project, and we need the abandonment in order to build it. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from,
I always hate talking with these maps.
so where's the mini storage on your last photo? It's little, where do they sit?
On this,
Those, where are those in your,
those are,
just trying to get oriented.
Garrett, go back to one of your first slides.
yeah. So
Yeah.
So the mini storage is right here.
Right?
So Jacob owns everything else on this block. And the condo project you saw, phase 1 is here, phase 2 is here, and this property owner, assuming it's never acquired by Jacobs, will maintain its access on Ralston and maintain its access through Church. But the picture I showed you was the condo, the phase 1 of the condos along here and then moving down. So
Parking's to the north?
what's that?
Parking for those condos is to the north.
No, it'd be an interior garage, 2-4, residential on top. 2-4.
Is that what goes on the other side? That faces the sands?
There's currently a lot of kind of different ideas. You've heard in the paper, if you read it, possibly a showroom, 500 to 600 seat showroom, bring folks from the sands, another kind of indoor event, maybe potentially some additional residential multifamily here. But I think Jacobs is kind of being very, very strategic and as they develop each block to make sure every use is correct, making sure the circulation is right. So condos for now along 2nd Street and then more to come on the back.
Gary,
And let me make one comment, I misspoke. This parcel is also not owned by Jacobs, that parcel is owned by WDP.
Gary, just a comment. I don't think 90 parking spaces is enough parking for 63 units. That's just a personal observation based on the condominium complex in which I live with 100 units and 160 parking spaces, and it's just not enough when you're downtown.
And it's a good point, I mean, I know we're not talking about the project, so I said, well, should I include some of these details or not? But I thought I erred on the side of just being transparent and open. I believe this zoning district does not require any parking. When Councilwoman Breckus and the council approved the Reisman text amendment, there was no parking downtown. So really, we don't have to do any, but that wouldn't make any sense for the market and the selling units, et cetera. So we came up with 90. We think it's a good, mix, but certainly it's still on design. And I think Chris is hearing your input tonight, and we'll do our best to take it into consideration.
I think it's actually a little closer to 100, and that's just the spots within the garage. Like you could be able to count some street parking as well, total count. But I agree, Gary. I think if we're going to sell some high-end condos, it's going to be important, especially the marketing effort, to have parking for each bed.
Absolutely.
And in the paper too, Mr. Jacobs mentioned a need for more parking down here altogether for the district. So trying to work with public-private partnerships with the city, with RTC, maybe we give some land, maybe RTC builds a parking garage, all kinds of ideas, but parking is definitely on the top of the list.
Jenny, doesn't the city have an ordinance where you have to have so many parking for so many units?
No, I mean, the trend really is to allow the market to dictate that sort of thing. So it probably is a best practice for the city to, let in an urban rebuild, decide what they're gonna do. Some people, really screw up and, then they end up having to find parking for their tenants otherwise, it's kind of like a hazard, people's, but it is a best practice. I mean, the problem I see with this is, the master plan talks about walkability, pedestrian scale, and it's just really hard to know that it's worth giving up this, very easy alley route of transportation without knowing the rest of the block, So did we just lose, everything's becoming so mega block with some of these, assemblages. And if you just see in context, you don't know if you're just creating another, casino wall, and what sort of, what is the public getting in terms of they've got a nice access route through this block.
But no one, further, again, kind of unusual to debate you, Councilwoman, before you heard the item, but no one uses this. I mean, this was access to the unit our building that's now vacant, that will be replaced with a condominium project. You have Second Street that has sidewalks, that have streetscape, and what's here now? I mean, let's remember what's here now. The dilapidated, kind of blighted buildings that I certainly wouldn't take my children down Church Street right now with that old 7-Eleven motel that has a lot of calls for service and code enforcement issues, but with the condominium project, with new streetscape, with additional amenities, I mean, we want, again, that was a great comment someone made. What's going to draw you out of Ward 1? Currently, what's there now isn't. Hopefully, the plan is, and what we're building, in fact, will. So I don't see any way, shape, or form how the public who is not using this right now, who uses Second Street and Ralston, will be harmed by this land being abandoned. Is my 2 cents.
Just want to add, I'm Brooke Oswald, I'm a planner with the city of Reno. Your process procedure, definitely want to encourage you to fill out the development sheets. Remember to relate them to the abandonment itself, not the project. The project's not what we're hearing tonight, it is the abandonment. Quickly to speak to parking with we just updated our Title 18 code. In our downtown district, we did go to developers being able to determine their parking. This is something similar that we've seen in the California neighborhood. In our past zoning, we've gone and moved that as Jenny mentioned, in planning, it is sort of a best practice to sort of move out of dictating strict parking and using that development density, those commercial uses and other uses that we're seeing in that downtown. So they are not required at this point to provide any parking, and that is really at the discretion of the developer to provide that.
And I would say too, like, if you look at what's going on at Park Lane, that used to be a public right of way through Park Lane, kind of broke up that parcel. So to get that development that they're moving forward with, they actually had to abandon some roads in there to get the block to do their development. And actually, Park Lane, interesting about, I don't know if you've been over there lately, but where you have the movie theater and have the apartments going up, they've created an unbelievable urban park there with a little kind of small theater area, green space. They're using residential construction tags to invest it into the area for a public green space that there's never been green space there. So again, this is nothing new as far as what the city has done in the past.
Any other board comments or questions?
You're gonna ask a question, too? Sure. I'm a little confused. First you said that Jacobs owns 9 of the 10 parcels, now you're saying maybe it's 8. Is that right?
So as far as when you abandon an alley or a road, you need consent.
No, I understand that. I'm a planner, I understand that stuff.
So
What I'm asking is, no, I support the issue of abandonments when adjacent property owners benefit from the assemblage of property. Makes that's the way development works. My question is, how many in that block, how many parcels does Jacobs actually own? And how many are under fee, are still under contract, or have they fallen out of contract?
Yeah, so we own or control all the 2
No,
parcels.
not control, I understand that, that's not owned, you actually own.
Yes, we do.
Control means you're under
Sorry,
contract, and that contract can fall out, just as it did, the UNR building fell out of contract in the prior development. This can happen again, that's my question. Has that fallen out of contract, the one you said, to Whitney P, has it or has it not?
For the record, Jacobs has never had a property that they've been under contract with fall out. 2, they've never been under contract with the Whitney P parcel. 3, the 10 parcels I mentioned were in regards to what properties have to sign an owner affidavits that abut this property. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This one is not, in fact, owned by Jacobs, but they own or control all the others. They own this one, which is kind of irrelevant to this piece, because it's not adjacent. This one, Whitney Peak, never been under contract. This piece never been under contract. The rest of them own or are under contract. And an owner has to sign an owner affidavit in regards to filing applications as well.
Okay, and so on your rendering, can you go back to that? The rendering of the condos? Yeah, what's the contemplated use for that area down on the corner?
That would just be a 4,000 or 5,000 square foot, retail area, coffee shop or neighborhood pizza place.
Okay.
Something that would amenity cater to the residents.
Okay, thank you. And then lastly, so the area behind the building that you said is something that could be an indoor entertainment center. Did I understand that right?
Again, I was mentioning the article potentially, yeah, potentially.
So there's no use contemplated at this time for that space.
Correct. Okay, no plans have been submitted.
Okay,
Any other board or audience questions?
thank you.
I just want to say that I've been on this NAB for quite some time. Looking forward to the day where you don't bring us abandonments, but you bring us a project that they're actually going to start constructing. So,
And Mr. Chairman, this condominium project will require a tentative map. And that will be coming before you next to analyze the tentative map in this project.
May I ask one more question? Do you have a anticipated time frame for that project, since that one seems to be more, I can understand the lack of specificity of a 20-year, development. I understand that because you have to go through the economic cycles. But some of these projects, I think you're pretty close to, right? So can you anticipate the date that will be submitted for that tentative map?
Sure, I believe, 2 weeks from today is the next intake date. It's October 25th, so as of right now, we are targeting to submit our tentative map for this project on that date. And there are a lot of moving parts, as you know, with the abandonment. There's some other pieces in there with the upcoming development agreement that, some moving parts that need to settle, but we hope that the design finishes up in January. We're in the permit, we're in March. May.
Thank you. And that would bring me back to, that's filed in October, that would bring me back to this body in November for a presentation and planning commission in December.
All right, any other questions or comments? Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Move on to item C, board, commissioner, and committee reports and announcements. Anything?
Nothing. Do we have anything? Sorry.
Hearing none, we'll move on to item D, future agenda items. Anybody have anything you'd like to bring up in future agenda? Hearing none. We'll move on to public comment. Any further public comment? Seeing none. We're going to move on to item F. This is for possible action.
I'm moving to adjourn.
I second.
All those for? Anyone opposed?
No.
Okay.
See you all on November 8th.
Got a little bit upstairs.